I already had this on there hammering, and it is starting to move just a little bit. And that's a 3/4 inch. It's a very heavy wrench. This is one I use for the tires. I got the two off on this side. I had to keep spraying them with oil and tightening them up and then loosening them back down and trying not to overheat them too much, because if you get them too hot and gall the threads while you're taking them off, then you have to replace them. But if you don't let them overheat, then you can work them back and forth. And of course I did wire brush it as much as I could. I just couldn't get behind the studs because the I-beam here is too close. I couldn't get a brush behind it. But got one off, and it did take a lot out of me to do that. So I don't know if it's because I just don't do this work on a regular basis, or because I'm getting old. Maybe combination of things, or maybe it's just really hard, heavy work. And anyway, I got the two off in the front, I got the two in the back to do, and then I still have to do the other side, because a truck this old, you can't just change one side unless you put a used spring on it, because the new spring will be way stiffer than the old one. Got all those nuts off of those U-bolts. I'm going to tap on them from the bottom with a hammer and knock them off of there. And then there's these two spacers, and then this big aluminum bumper thing with the rubber top on it that will hit the frame if it bottoms out. That all that comes off. There's a centering pin in the middle and all this stuff. Anyway, I'm going to take the clamps off the front here. I'm going to take a pin off the bottom of the shackle there. Got to take those shackle bolts off the side. If you saw the video on changing pins and bushings, I'm just going to take that off of there. Just the bottom, don't have to mess with the top, unless of course the pins and bushings were bad and you had to change them. This would be a time to do it while we're in here. But I'm pretty sure they're okay, because we did this work not too awful long ago. A couple, 3 years ago we did this. Got my U-bolts off, and this thing that goes on top, as you can see, there's a lot of rot going on. I don't know if I can still use this properly or not, because it might be able to slide around on top of that leaf spring with all this rotted out here. This piece cleaned up pretty good. In fact, I found out it's supposed to be hollow. The big tab down in the middle there, that's the bottom of this rubber bumper on top. That's how they pulled it through. So that is not a bad thing. It is a little rough looking, but for a 22-year-old truck that's semi-retired to only local work, I don't think I need to replace that. It's not broken. And this end here I don't have to worry about, because I'm replacing the whole spring, and that piece comes with the new spring. There's the new spring there. I just walked it over here. It's heavy, but not impossible. I'm going to say it weighs 80, 90 pounds. Just guessing, I'm not sure. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start taking these things off. I'm going to leave the other side on completely. That'll help keep this axle in its proper position. It'll keep it clamped at the right angle, and help keep it from rolling. And of course I got my wheels chocked. So I'll go ahead and knock these pins out of there, take these bolts out and knock these pins out. It's just common sense. If you need me to tell you how to do that, then you need help doing this, because it's just bolts holding the clamps on the bottom on that one, and over here you got bolts going through the shackle. You pull those out and then you knock your pin out of there. What I think I'm going to do on this side is, since I've got some fuel lines and stuff in the way for knocking the pin all the way out over there, what I think I'm going to do is take this bolt out on the bottom so that the pin will come out, because it goes through a notch on the pin. And then I'm going to leave this one on here and just take this one off on the top, pull this out, and then I can just use this for a handle to get this pin and pull it out this direction towards the outside. And I think that's going to work for me a little better to do it that way. Got those bolts out, the one down there and the one up here, and I'm just tapping on this to get that out. All those shims, washers and spacers, I don't know how many I'm going to need. There's bound to be some wear on the steel as well as on the aluminum shackles, but when you put them back together, they should be greased up, and you should put as many in as you can possibly get, all the way down to the thinnest spacer. And you can go to the hardware store and get, I forgot, I think they're 1 1/4 inch ID washers that are that you can use to take up larger space instead of buying a whole bunch of little tiny shims. Now I gotta just take those clamps off the front and then drive a wedge in underneath this, between this shock bracket and the spring. Hopefully they will come apart pretty easy, and maybe I don't have to drive anything. Maybe I can just pick it up. I got room to lift this end of it up and get it out of there. There's going to be like a pin or a stud like this bolt right here, your center bolt. There's going to be something like that in here underneath as well, and so we'll have to lift it up high enough to slide that out of there. And we'll just try to leave all this stuff stacked in there if I can. If I have to take it off to clean it, then I will. I'm going to go ahead and put a pry bar underneath this and lift that spring up. And I'm going to put it on the camera. I don't know what it's going to do. Just put this on the tripod. Not doing nothing really. I guess I just need to get underneath there and lift the thing out of there. It'd be easier if this tire wasn't on it, but I kind of need the tire on there to hold the axle up. Oh, I don't know if there's room for me here. Glad I'm not real big. There, now I can pull it out from the front. I can get back out of here. I'm going to have to take the camera out from where it is. I'm going to have to feed that spring. I'm going to have to stand here where the camera is, and I'm going to feed that spring down through here like this, because I think it's the only way I'm going to be able to physically manhandle it. I still have the big jack right in front of the spring, and it's going to be in the way from doing it from underneath. So like I say, I'm going to feed it down through here, and I have to move the camera, so can't get that on camera. It's in position. It actually went in pretty easily. I bet it's only no more than 1 or 2 minutes since I turned the camera off. So I'm going to go ahead and start I'm going to clean up those pieces down there and put them on up here, get them in position, put them on, and then start putting the back together. I got everything pretty much put back together on this side. I got a lot of extra washers down there, spacers, and that is because the new spring is not as worn out on the sides from flexing and just wiping away the material on the while it's bouncing up and down all the time. So I got extra spacers left over. These U-bolts are not tightened down yet. I left those loose, and I had to work this jack up and down a little bit a couple of times to position this spring so I can slide that pin back in there. And I had to keep pulling the pin out and putting more spacers on, pull it out, take some off, back and forth until I got it where I could just barely shove the bolts back through. Had just enough spacers in there where I can just barely shove the bolts back through. I'm ready to tighten it down, and hopefully it's not going to have any side play. So tighten those bolts down there on that one, and tighten this down, and then I'll be ready to start on the other side. Of course, I don't need to videotape that unless I run into something different over there. I did end up doing something a little extra on this, and that is, if I can get into position with the camera here, is this back support here with the pin in it, where the pin's just up there out of the way right now so it doesn't fall. It's got a new pin and a new bushing in that. I took the other one off. I had one from the last time I had to change one of these, and I took it in the shop, and I took the bushing out of it and put a new one in there and a new pin. So I did not do that on video, but I will go in the shop and show about how I did that. Well, let's see, where is it? Oh, it's sitting over here on this trash can. So what I did was, I clamped this thing in the vise. I got a big vise over here. I ought to put a link as to how I got this vise. I put that in there and clamped it in there like that, and of course it was clean. I'm trying to do this with one hand. Clamped it in there tight like that, and I took a Sawzall. I had some extra blades, didn't know which blade I was going to end up using. This one's one of those that's got the diamond grit on it. I did not use that one. I used one that is got the carbide tipped teeth on it for cutting hard steel. And I cut just lengthwise with a Sawzall. I cut, and I was watching, and as soon as I got into the aluminum, then I stopped. I wasn't worried about the aluminum getting a cut in it, as long as it's not a deep cut, because we're not riding on the aluminum, we're riding on the bushing once the new bushing goes in. So I cut the old bushing out. I cut it in two places, one long line here all the way from the top end all the way to the bottom, and I put another end in about maybe a third of the way around, put another cut in. Then I was able to chisel these two sections of bushing out of there, And here they are, should be laying on the floor here. Here's one of them here. So sorry I didn't do it on video, but it does have two layers inside. One is just the steel backing, and the other is the actual bushing itself inside the steel backing, and so that's why it has two layers like that. And you can see I didn't even cut completely all the way through here because that piece stayed on it, but I got enough of it off that it just folded over and came on out. And as far as putting the new bushing in, I wiped some grease in there, and then I took this this long bolt with these washers. I think it's a 3/4 inch thread bolt, and put that through the new bushing. Well, first I started the new bushing, laid a chunk of wood. This is what I used to install seals, and I just laid that across top of the bushing and hammered on it a couple of times to get it started in the hole, get it in the right position. And then I put that bolt through there and pressed it on in with an impact wrench, and you can watch me do that changing bushings on another video. I'll put a link to that video replacing those bushings. So that's how I did it. Sorry I didn't do it here, but we'll put the link up showing how I did the bushings on the springs. It's pretty much the same thing.